Good afternoon. My name is Jen Carnine, and today I will be giving a speech on domestic violence. Sources that I used for this presentation are Domestic Violence Resource Center, Bureau of Justice Statistics, Bright Horizons, Nebraska Domestic Violence Sexual Assault Coalition, National Center on Domestic and Sexual Violence, Domestic Abuse Intervention Programs, the American Medical Association. Every day, 4 women die in this country as a result of domestic violence, often after a long escalating pattern of abuse. That is approximately 1,400 women per year. It is estimated that 1 in 4 women will have experienced domestic violence at some point during her lifetime, and 1 in 14 men will have been physically assaulted by a current or former partner. Domestic violence is not caused by illness, genetics, alcohol, drugs, anger, stress, problems in the relationship, or the behavior of the victim. Domestic violence can be defined as a pattern of assaultive and coercive behaviors, including physical, sexual, and psychological attacks, as well as economic coercion that adults or adolescents use against their partner. Every 9 seconds in the United States, a woman is assaulted or beaten. Domestic violence can happen to anyone regardless of education, age, sexual orientation, family structure, ethnicity, or economic status. Using the Justice Department estimates there are about 50,000 to 60,000 domestic violence victims annually in Nebraska. Domestic violence is the most common cause of non-fatal injury to women in the United States. The American Medical Association says domestic violence is more common than auto accidents, muggings, and rapes combined as a cause of injury. Between 19 and 30% of women seeking care in emergency rooms are battered women. About 25% of women who attempt to commit suicide are domestic abuse victims. Domestic violence is a learned behavior. Perpetrators learn to be abusive from a variety of sources, including observation, experience, reinforcement from family members, communities, or their respective cultures. Domestic violence is an attempt to exert power and control over a partner. It is a conscious, deliberate choice by the perpetrator. The abuser was most likely not abusive in the beginning stages of the relationship and does not always use physical violence. It is rare for an abuser to physically assault his partner prior to beginning a pattern of verbal abuse and emotional control. Tactics used by a batterer also involve much more than physical abuse. In addition to being assaulted, it's maybe once a week, once a month, once a year. Most abusers engage in other behaviors which make their partner fearful and afraid. The Power and Control Wheel was developed by the Domestic Abuse Intervention Project in Duluth, Minnesota. This wheel serves as an illustration of the many tactics abusers will use. It's often the use of the non-physical tactics which have the greatest impact on a woman's feeling of self-worth. Physical violence, sexual violence, power and control. Using emotional abuse would be putting her down, making her feel bad about herself, calling her names, making her think she's crazy, playing mind games, humiliating her, making her feel guilty. Using isolation, controlling what she does, who she sees, who she talks to, where she goes, limiting her outside involvement, using jealousy to justify the actions. Minimizing, denying, and blaming, basically making light of the abuse and not taking her concerns about it seriously, saying the abuse didn't happen or shifting the responsibility of the abusive behavior, maybe by saying she caused it. Using children, making her feel guilty about the children, threatening to take the children away. Using male privilege, treating her like a servant, making all of the big decisions, acting like the master of the castle. Economic abuse, preventing her from getting or keeping a job, making her ask for money, giving her an allowance, taking her money. Using coercion and threats, making and or carrying out threats to do something to hurt her, threatening to leave her, to commit suicide, to report her to welfare, making her drop charges if charges had been filed. Using intimidation, making her afraid by using looks, actions, gestures, smashing things, destroying her property, abusing pets, displaying weapons. This is a very good tool to use. Witnessing domestic violence is also abusive to children. Domestic violence affects every member of the family, including the children. Family violence creates a home environment where children live in constant fear. Children who witness family violence are affected in ways similar to children who are physically abused. They are often unable to establish nurturing bonds with either parent. Children are at greater risk for abuse and neglect if they live in a violent home. Statistics show that over 3 million children witness violence in their home each year. Those who see and hear violence in the home suffer physically and emotionally. Children react to their environment in different ways, and reactions can vary depending on the child's gender or age. Children exposed to family violence are more likely to develop social, emotional, psychological, or behavior problems than those who were not. The trauma they experience can show up in many ways: emotional, behavior, social, or physical disturbances that could affect their development and continue into adulthood. While child abuse often occurs without domestic violence, spouse abuse is the best predictor of child abuse. Between 50 and 70% of men who abuse their female partners also abuse their children. A question society commonly has is, why don't they just leave? It's so important that people understand that the most dangerous time for the victims of domestic violence is often when they decide to leave or when they have recently left. In cases of homicide related to domestic violence, 75% of the time it is when the victim is leaving or has left the abuser. Leaving is potentially very dangerous for a victim. There are many reasons women do not just leave. They have nowhere to go, they can't afford to leave. Batterers are very controlling individuals. They restrict their partner's social contacts and they give limited access to money. Battering is a very powerful and effective form of control, and any person experiencing this type of violence is likely to become temporarily immobilized. However, the more the victim begins to recognize that the abuser is responsible for his or her own behavior and what is happening is not their fault, they will be more apt to get help. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.